A very warm good evening to all of you. Welcome to the 123rd session of CENTA's Webinar Series for Teachers. I hope all of you are keeping safe and staying healthy. Over the next of the next 1 hour, we will focus on how teachers can create better learning objectives for their classroom. Today's facilitator is Miss Nafpreet Bra. Nafpreet ma'am is a TGT at Manav Ratna International School, Mohali. She has a master's in chemistry and in education. She is an artist with proficiency in one-stroke painting. She's also a sustainability enthusiast and a mentor for the Eco Club in her school. She believes in and practices recycling and upcycling a lot. And she is obviously a fitness freak by the look of her, and she loves to learn new dance forms. Welcome, ma'am. Before I hand over the session to you, uh, I would like to inform all participants that they will receive a certificate for this webinar. So please do fill in the feedback form that will be shared with you at 5:45 p.m. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Simran. And I welcome all the educators here today. So, without wasting any time, I would like to start with my webinar. So, in the coming 50 minutes or so, we are going to talk about what are learning objectives and outcomes. Most of you must be knowing, but yet we need to refresh our learnings on day-to-day basis, being educators. So, we are going to talk about learning objectives, framing learning objectives and outcomes, and why they are so very much beneficial when we are planning our sessions on day-to-day basis. So, ma'am, should I shift to my? I hope my screen is visible in the full screen mode.
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Yes. So, my topic for the day is framing learning objectives and learning outcomes. So, let's start with an inquiry and with a question. So, as being a 21st century learners, as we are catering to 21st century learners and we all are 21st century educators, so we should promote inquiry based learning. So, I also have a question for all of you in the starting of the session. So, may I please get a response to this question that why do we plan a session? So for with this session, I mean just like on day-to-day basis, we are teaching in our classrooms and we are going to a classroom to teach something, right? So we plan, we do a planning. So my question is that why do we do that planning? What is the need of that planning?
I can see a few answers coming in. Mr. Surinder says to update ourselves. I can see some responses saying to become systematic so that learning objectives are attained, to be
Yeah.
prepared, to make learning easy to understand, to achieve goals of the session with effective time management, for the session to go smoothly, to be foolproof, to get desired outcomes, uh, for smooth conduction of class, plan to have some results, to follow time management for content. Uh, I can see many answers saying
Right,
about time
right,
management.
right, right. Right. So all of you are at some of the other point, you people are on target. So yes, we do plan a session. So first point I would like to pick up is yes, we do want to plan a session because we remain focused. So the first thing is that a teacher who is in the classroom, he or she should be very much clear with what he or she is going to deliver to the students when he or she enters the classroom for the coming 40 minutes or 30 minutes or 50 minutes, whatever is the duration as per the timetable of your school, right? So we need to be very much focused on what we are going to teach in class today, or what we want our students to learn in today's session. Second thing is that somebody of you said that we need to attain our learning objective. So we need to attain the objective of the session. So if suppose any example we can take, suppose I am just taking an example from an English class. Suppose I want us to today I am teaching students how to narrate a story. So what is going to be my objective for that particular thing? So yes, we need to have a planning for that, to attain that objective, whatever you decide as a subject in charge or as a subject teacher of your particular subject. Then also, time management is a very important factor when we talk of a session planning. So yes, so in this, all these answers are very correct, and all of you are on point that we need to manage time when we are in a session. We need to focus on our objective, and also we need to be focused ourselves, because if we are clear with what we are going to do with the students, obviously the students will have more clarity in learning that what they are learning, right? So thank you everybody for your responses. Moving on. So, why do we plan a session? I have two very simple points here, that is to keep students engaged productively. So, all the points that we have just discussed, they can be clubbed together here in this part, that to keep students engaged productively. We do not want students to get distracted during the session or not get interested during the session, right? So, we want to engage them productively. And again, the most other important thing is to achieve the learning objective. So as many of you said that objectives are to be attained or to get the desired outcome. So to get the desired outcome, we also need to have an objective in mind, right? Then only we plan on what we are going to conduct in our session, and how we are going to make our students get that concept very right that we are going to teach, right? Okay. Right. Now let's have two clear definitions about what is a learning objective. So learning objectives are the statements that describe what student will be expected to learn by the end of the school year, course, unit, lesson, or any project. So here we will be discussing about our sessions that we conduct with the students, but learning objectives are the larger goals, as the second definition says, that it is an overarching goal that students are expected to achieve by the end of the session or a unit. So what I mean to say here is that learning objectives are the goals that we need to achieve, right? And so when we frame a learning objective, we look at a larger goal. It can be at the completion of the unit, by the end of the unit, what your child should be able to achieve or learn, and or by the end of the session. If you are planning your learning objective for a particular session, then you need to know that that is the larger objective, that is the larger goal that we want to achieve for a particular session. So learning objectives can be framed for an year, for the year long course, for a unit, for a lesson, for a project, for anything. But the only thing we need to remember is that objective is always the main goal, the overarching goal of all the things that we are going to conduct during a session or during a project or during the whole unit of that particular subject, right? So yes, so learning objectives should be smart. So what are the characteristics we are looking out for when we talk of a learning objective? So it should be smart. So it is an acronym which is used for, so what do we mean by S? So S means specific. That is, it should say exactly the statement that we are going to frame, for which I'll be giving you few examples, and then you will also give me few examples. So we'll be conducting an interactive session in that manner. So what do we mean by S? So S says specific. That is, it exactly says what learner will be able to do. Your learning objective should not give a vague statement. It should not be, something like which the student is not very clear about, that what he or she is going to learn, or what you are not clear about, that what you are actually going to teach, right? So it should not be very general in nature. It should be very specific. Then it should be measurable. When we are writing the statement of learning objective, it should bring in the outcome in some measurable terms. For example, just a little example we'll take here. Like if I write down that students will understand the process of, for example, we take a photosynthesis. Now, understanding is not a measurable verb that we can use, because understanding is different for different people, right? I can understand to a more extent, Somebody can understand to a lesser extent. Similarly, as we are catering to all different kind of students in a classroom, so every child has a different level of understanding. So understand is not measurable term that you can use while writing a learning objective. So but if I write, suppose I am conducting a mathematics session, and if I write that students will solve the given problems based on maybe mixed fractions. So now solve the given problems means how many problems you will give. Like you may give them 2, 3, 4, 5 depending upon whatever you want to give. Now if the child is able to solve all the problems, so your objective is obtained. Now you are able to measure that how many problems out of the given problems the child is able to solve, right? So hence solve is a measurable term that can be used while writing a learning objective. Then what do we mean by a is attainable, means within the given time frame. So suppose we are conducting a project with the students, so I have given them a project to make during the session, and I want them to complete that project within the given time limit and under the given conditions, right? So the given conditions can again vary from subject to subject. It can, the time limit can vary from the session of your time, that is allotted time to your session, right? So attainable means if you are giving them a time limit and if you are giving them the given conditions, so are the children able to complete the project given or the task given in the scheduled time and given conditions under the given conditions? If yes, then yes, then it, so your statement should contain, may contain or may not contain, again it depends upon, but if there are conditions and scheduled time, so it should be very clearly stated in your learning objective statement, right? Then relevant. So it should hold relevance, importance to the needs of the student and to the community. So whenever we are framing a learning objective, like the same topic, suppose if I talk of friction, so friction I'm teaching in grade 4, I'm teaching in grade 5, I'm teaching in grade 6, 7, 8, but the level of that topic is going to be different. So how much relevance it holds to the age of the student or to the need of the student at that point of time, so that also matters. So it should be very much so the verbs that we will be using or the statement that we frame of a learning objective should cater to the needs of the student, to the looking at the level or the grade level of the student and the age level of the student, to what extent the child will be able to understand that thing. Then last is time framed. So when we talk of particular session and when we talk of one session, so your session has a given time of completion. You are supposed to wind up your session in a given time. Similarly, the objective that you want to attain by the end of the session should also be time framed. You should be able to achieve that objective. It should be designed in such a way that you are able to achieve that objective by the end of your session or the unit or the course, as per for what we are designing the learning objective. Whereas in this particular session, I will be talking about our individual day-to-day sessions that we plan for our students. So moving on from here, now there is a lot of ambiguity when we talk of learning objectives and outcomes. Now here, just two things I would like to say, that objectives are the goals, the overarching goals that we need to achieve, and outcomes are the consequences. So I will just move forward with these two meanings which I've just told. So when we talk of objectives, objectives are the goals and outcomes are the consequences or the results. Now let's see what I mean to say by these two things. Now again, here is a definition for learning outcomes. So what does it say? Learning outcomes are the stepping stones to achieve an overarching learning objective. These are also built in the same way as learning objective is built, but are subordinate to the learning objective. So when we talk of learning outcomes, so we break down, actually what I mean to say here is that learning objective is broken down into smaller steps, which we call as learning outcomes. Now, when we are planning a session, then we plan that child, we don't plan a monotonous session these days, right? Wherein teacher is only giving the lecture and teacher is only telling the students what to do. There is a lot of interaction, there is a lot of collaboration, a lot of cooperation which is to be incorporated when we are planning a session or when we are conducting a session. So when we conduct sessions, so the session should not be monotonous. It should cater to all the different students that are sitting in your class, and we should take care that every student has a different level of learning. Some are good readers, some are good listeners, some are good visual learners, some are good audio learners. So we need to incorporate different components of learning into our session. And it is possible. Like everything is, all these things are possible based on what we are teaching. The only thing is, we as educators have to be a bit more creative and more comprehensive when we are thinking of making a session plan. So when we talk of learning outcomes, so we design certain activities, and those activities then lead to your learning outcomes. So I'll come to that in the next slide. So for example, this is just an example for all of you, and then I'll ask you people to frame one little example for me to understand, so that we can have a, I mean, you can have an interaction through your comments to me, that what do you understand by this. So here my learning objectives are, so this learning objective I have planned for one session, right? Wherein I want my students to conduct an experiment. So my learning objective, that is the overall, the overarching goal of this session is students will conduct an experiment to prove that chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. So here the word conduct gives me a clear picture. It is a measurable word that I have used. The verb that I've used here is measurable in terms of that when the students will finish this whole session, then all the students will be in a position to conduct an experiment. Now, for all the students to be in a position to conduct this experiment by the end of the session, I have to break the topics of the session in different levels. So those different levels which I'm talking about, those come out as learning outcomes. Now see, what are the learning outcomes? So when I write learning outcomes for my session, so it is for my reference, it is for educators reference, it is for teachers reference, right? So student will be able to, so you can just see the difference here. I have not written students here, I have written student here. Now why I have written student? Because when I talk of learning outcomes, when I talk of the consequences of every activity that I am going to conduct with the children in the class, that should be student specific, right? So by the end of this session, what are going to be the learning outcomes? Those will be, so learning outcomes are always multiple. Learning objective is one, overarching goal is one for a particular session or a particular unit, but outcomes are different. Because in every session we do not conduct the same kind of teaching, right? We have different topics to teach, and accordingly we design different activities for students to teach in every session, right? So student will be able to define photosynthesis, define bleaching, explain the role of alcohol in bleaching, observe the change in the color of the leaf while performing starch test by using iodine solution, note the result of the conducted experiment, conclude that photosynthesis cannot take place in the absence of chlorophyll. So you see all the words which I have highlighted in yellow color here. So define is measurable. You will get a definition from the child. Define, again, bleaching is measurable because child will be able to define the process of bleaching. Explain, again, explain is measurable because child will explain you that what alcohol does in the process of bleaching. Observe, so child will be making an observation of the experiment conducted, the experiment that he or she will conduct. So observe is, observation is measurable. Then note down the result. Obviously, when the child is writing a statement for to note down the result, so it is again measurable. And conclude, what is the conclusion that the child is going to draw out of this whole experiment, right? So these are the different things we are going to conduct during the session to bring the child at the level of conducting the experiment as a whole on his or her own after this whole session. Now, I would like my fellow educators, those who have joined the session today, so according to your subject area, can you just frame one learning objective on any topic that you want, and two or three learning outcomes maybe from that?
Ma'am, we'll wait for 30 seconds for the answers to
Yeah,
come
yeah,
in.
sure, because they will take some time.
There are a few of you who are saying that the screen is not clear. If you change your streaming
Yeah.
resolution to 720p, the screen will be clear, because the problem is not with the screen but probably with your internet and resolution settings. Uh, so
Oh,
if that's possible, you should change it to 720p.
okay. It's actually, I don't know. Can you help me how to do that? Because at
No,
my
ma'am,
end,
not
it's
you,
showing.
ma'am. Actually, not at your end, at the participant's end. So,
Okay,
we've started receiving some responses regarding the learning objective and learning outcome. Purnima ma'am says to differentiate between rational and irrational numbers.
Mhm. This is the learning
Uh,
objective. Yeah.
Yes. Latha
Yes.
ma'am says the students will be able to explain the concept of uh, adjectives.
Hmm.
Ashwini ma'am says the learning objective is children will be reading the soft board. Pooja ma'am
Hmm.
says, okay, I think that's Archana ma'am says to find area of triangle.
Okay. Okay. So
Savitri ma'am
students will.
says to understand. Sorry. Please go ahead,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Please
Sorry.
carry on. Please carry on. I'll talk about it later. Yes. Please carry
To
on now.
understand different types of triangles based on sides.
Hmm.
Dr. Shamshu says learning objective is to teach nouns. uh, Sarita ma'am says students will be able to identify different types of houses. Then we have a few others, creating table. The student will be able to make table in HTML.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Okay.
then, yeah, that's, I think,
All right, all right.
some
So
of the
I got
example,
a good
because there are.
number of examples. So yes, so wherein somebody wrote down objective is to teach. Objective is to teach
Yeah, teach nouns. That
nouns,
would,
right?
yeah.
So here I just want to say one thing, that when we are, when we are in a 21st century classroom, so here we do not focus on only teaching and delivering. We also it is a classroom which is student centered. So when we frame a learning objective, we should start from what students will be doing by the end of the session, right? So learning objective is for the students, yes, where we have written to conduct an experiment. That's okay, like you see these kind of learning objectives, many at many platforms we see this. But I just want to clarify here. So when we talk of a 21st century learner classroom, it is more or less student centered. So the NEP 2020, our learning policies also say, teaching learning policies, that we should focus more on the student centered teaching learning process, right? So otherwise, when again few are fine, and then here I just want to mention that when we say, again, we will avoid the using of term understand. So again, understanding, as I already mentioned, is a vague term. It does not specify, it is not measurable in any terms. So whenever we are framing a learning objective, it should be measurable and specific to the needs of the students, to what we are conducting. So I have got good number of responses. So these are all the learning objective statements which I have got. So when we are framing a learning objective, an overarching goal, Now we will break that goal into certain steps depending upon what activities I'm going to conduct in my session or classroom to um, achieve that learning objective, right? So thank you everybody for giving in your responses. Let's move on further. Right. So, all our educators here, and I believe that every one of you have undergone this training related to Bloom's taxonomy. So, again, a quick question for all of you. So, what is Bloom's taxonomy about? May I get a response for this? What is Bloom's taxonomy, and why? I mean, why do we use it in teaching learning process so much?
We'll again wait for 30 seconds for the
जी
responses to come in.
जी
I can see Savitri ma'am is saying for stage by stage development. Divya ma'am is saying knowledge.
Hmm.
Uh, we still, okay, there are a few levels of learning, stages of learning, domains of learning. Uh,
Okay.
that's different levels of learning,
Okay.
step by step learning. I can see a lot of domains of learning. Uh, then I can see a lot of three domains of learning, and
Yes.
it elaborates about concept of teaching, uh, and to cater to different styles of learning, to
Right.
achieve
Right.
tangible goals,
Hmm.
critical to promote critical thinking,
Yeah.
measurable stages and domains of learning, to deliver
Right.
the lesson from simpler to complex way, in a simpler to complex way,
Hmm.
classifying educational learning, classifying learning objectives.
All right.
It,
All right.
yeah, that those
That's
are
thank
like
you.
some of the responses.
Thank you, Simran ma'am, for telling me all the answers. Yes, great. Thank you, everybody, for responding. So, yes, Bloom's taxonomy was given by Dr. Benjamin Bloom, and it came into effect in 1956. Just a little intro I'm giving here. And he was an educational psychologist. So, Bloom's taxonomy promotes higher order thinking skills in children. So it talks about higher order thinking skills means it talks about analyzing and evaluating the concepts, procedures, information, right? So it helps in taking our teaching learning process from a very simple level to a higher order thinking level. So what we can say is lower order thinking level to higher order thinking level. So, what are the three main domains in to which Bloom's taxonomy caters to? So, the three main domains are cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Now, cognitive domains mainly deals with the knowledge part of a child or students. So, knowledge part means all the mental skills where we talk of IQ levels or intelligence. Then psychomotor talks about the physical skills, the motor skills, development of skills. So like our NEP 2020 also talks about skill based education. So it's very important that we make it inclusive in what in our day to day teaching learning process. So skill building is a very important aspect of 21st century teaching learning process. Then affective domain, it deals with the emotional side of a person, of an individual, right? So affective domain deals with all like self awareness and the feelings that we have, right? How do we express ourselves? We are empathetic, sympathetic, we are considerate, we are sensible. So all these things are taken care of under the affective domain of Bloom's taxonomy. Now, when we talk of teaching learning process, so we specifically deal with the cognitive domain in school education and in the education, in the whole of education journey, we talk of mainly we cater to the cognitive domain. So, I'll be discussing with you what are the other levels of cognitive domain. Now, here are the steps to frame a measurable learning objective. Like I gave you an example before, and you people also tried to give me some of your best understood examples. Now these are the steps that we can follow to frame an effective measurable learning objective. So what are these steps? First thing is we start with the stem sentence. I'll again take an example to explain what I mean by all these steps. Then we determine the learning outcome. Like in the previous example where I mentioned learning objective, so I wrote down students will, so that is my stem sentence. Determine the learning outcome. So what is going to be my main objective, what I want as the main outcome? They will conduct the experiment. So conduct is the measurable or the main learning outcome that I want. Then consult Bloom's wheel to select the appropriate level and verb, which we are going to look into in the next slide. Then write the verb and learning outcome in one statement, and when that is combined with the stem, forms a complete sentence. Right? So here, so these are the 6 levels of cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy. Right? So it starts with remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Now, what do all these things mean? So, when we talk of only remembering, so remembering is simply when we just have to remember the facts or recognize something. So, recognizing and recalling things come under remembering part of cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy. When we say understand, so like I give an example to explain something. For example, I say define photosynthesis, and then next step is explain the process of photosynthesis. So a child will be able to explain only if he has or she has understood the concept of photosynthesis. Then apply. So where am I applying it? Where am I applying the concepts that I have studied so far? So applying is when I am able to connect the concept studied in my class in a particular subject to my real life. For example, a child is preparing a lemonade, and I ask him or her that what are you preparing? Is it a solution? Is it a mixture? Is it a heterogeneous mixture or homogeneous mixture? So if the child has understood that concept very well in the class in theory, then only he or she will be able to connect or apply the knowledge to the lemonade. So he or she will explain me that why it is called a true solution or a mixture, and why it is not a compound, or why it is not heterogeneous, or why it is homogeneous, only if he or she has understood the concept of mixtures and true solutions. Right? Then analyze. Now you are given a problem and you are asked to find out a solution to it. So the child is asked to analyze the problem. Now, for example, I mean, can anybody give me an example of which I can further analyze it? Right? So can you just give me a statement? Can you give me a problem of which you can give your children to analyze the information further on it? Can I have one example from anyone? So we can take it as an example to explain analysis.
Just a second, ma'am. There's usually a lag of 30 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
Uh, there's a response saying compare shadow and image. To compare
Okay.
shadow and image.
All right. So we know what is a shadow and we know what is an image, right? So analysis. Now a child is supposed to analyze that why shadow is called a shadow and why image is called an image, right? So he will look into different aspects of it. So they are supposed to explain you that why shadow is shadow and image is image, right? So they will break down the information, they will look into the little concepts that they have studied so far about a shadow and an image, right? So that is how analysis take place. Now another example I can give, like in Delhi, suppose we say that Delhi AQI levels are hazardous. So the statement is given to the students and they are asked to analyze the data that they have over net about the AQI index of air quality index of Delhi. So they will analyze that data, and then they will be able to explain you that why is it so. right? So this is how we bring in or we design some activities in the classroom for the students to analyze. So this is the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. Again, it comes under the higher order level thinking skills. Then evaluate. So evaluate is when we have the information and now we are at a position to make a judgment about it. So after analysis, we are able to evaluate. After I have analyzed the data, after I have found out that why image is called an image and why a shadow is called a shadow, so then I will be able to compare or differentiate or give a concrete statement about image and shadow, or the other example that I gave you. So if the students are analyzing the data, they will collect the information, they will analyze the given data, and then they will evaluate or give their judgment upon it. So that is again a higher order level thinking skill. Then creating. Now we are combining. So maybe after getting all the data around for the AQI, students are given a project to design something so that they can control the pollution levels of Delhi. So they may come up with few ideas, but the whole thing starts from the understanding level, right? Remembering is simply rote learning. Then understanding, from the understanding, we start building the base for applying, analyzing, evaluating, and then finally creating. So creation is the final level of the highest level of higher order thinking skills, we can say, wherein the child is able to put together all the information, all the understanding that he or she has for a given concept to build up something, to create something, right? So these are all the 6 levels. So when I was talking about this step, I'm just shifting back to my slide. So when I was talking about determine the learning outcome and then consult Bloom's wheel to select the appropriate level and verb. So this is how from here you can select the appropriate level, that the session that you are conducting with your children, is it at the understanding level or applying level or analyzing or evaluating or creating. So it depends upon what level of the session we are conducting with the students, right? So now this is the whole chart. This you can find on internet anywhere. So these are called the active verbs developed based on Bloom's taxonomy. So these are the verbs which we can use. When I was talking about measurable terms and verbs, so these are the measurable verbs that we can use when we are creating our learning objectives as well as outcomes, right? So under knowledge, all these verbs that you see, define, identify, describe, label, list, all these are measurable. There is nothing vague in it, you can see. Then again, understand what are the different verbs that we can use to write down our learning objective and outcomes in measurable terms. So again, like discuss, distinguish, extend, predict, associate, contrast, convert. So all these are measurable. Again, the same goes for apply. Now when we talk about, so you can also distinguish between the verbs that are used for understanding level and application level. So when we apply, so we are able to solve, we are able to apply, we are able to illustrate, modify, calculate, change, demonstrate, experiment, relate, sketch. So this is, or dramatize. So catering to all the different subject areas, you can pick up verbs from here and create your learning objectives and outcomes. Then analysis, similar thing goes for analysis. Like few examples I'll take, like prioritize. The child will be able to prioritize, right? Or the children will prioritize, or they will categorize, they will differentiate, discriminate. So one of you were giving me an example of differentiate between this and this, so this comes under analysis level, right? When they're able to analyze and compare, contrast, classify. So some of the verbs you may find overlapping also, but that's okay. It depends upon to what level we are catering to when we are designing our session plan. Then evaluate, again criticize, evaluate, appraise, judge, support, compare. So again, you can see compare is overlapping. Then create, again, so there are different words like design, compose, plan, formulate, hypothesize, compile, construct. All these words are there under create level of Bloom's cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy. So these are the 6 levels which we usually follow when we frame our learning objectives and outcomes for our sessions or for a particular unit or course. Now, here are again few examples. So, looking at these examples, I would like my fellow friends, those who have joined here, to give me few examples. Like now, we are almost at the end of this, so I hope I have made myself clear. And if you have understood, I would like to really have some good examples from all of you. So you can give me examples of learning objectives, and if anybody wishes to, then you can break that learning objective. Just plan, just take 2 to 3 minutes as per your convenience, and just give me one example wherein you are also writing learning outcomes to that learning objective that you have framed. So here are few examples. Like the stem is students will, then we are choosing the verb, the active verb or action verb that we call it, explain photosynthesis. Students will list the various elements of a sustainable city. Students will create. Again, create is, so I have color coded these so that we are able to differentiate between them. What does it mean? So students will, again, a stem sentence. It is stem of the sentence. Then create is the action verb. A model of lungs with the help of given materials. Students will solve the problems based on mixed fractions. Students will identify the deficiency diseases given the symptoms of the diseases. Now you can see here I have just given one condition also. So students will identify the deficiency diseases given the symptoms of the diseases. So students have to identify the deficiency diseases if they are given some symptoms of the diseases, right? So in this way, like, applying conditions and time frame is all subjective. I mean, it depends upon which subject you are catering to, which topic we are catering to, and what is the demand of the topic at that point of time or in that particular session. So it is not necessary that your every learning objective should carry the conditions and the time conditions, but it is necessary that your learning objective is specific, attainable, and measurable by the end of the session. So, may I just have few examples from
Yeah,
my friends?
ma'am, there are a few examples that have come in. Anuradha ma'am says to students will be able to differentiate between plastic and rubber.
Hmm.
Uh, Ira ma'am says again to understand importance of water cycle, which probably is not a
Yeah,
Bloom's relate
yeah,
measurable learning outcome. Uh,
yes.
Purnima ma'am says to draw an equilateral triangle.
Hmm. Okay.
Then I have Meenu ma'am who's saying analyze students will be able to analyze the results of an experiment.
Hmm.
Uh, Joe sir says children will be able to analyze the importance of water.
Hmm.
And just moving down, uh, okay, I can see a lot of thank yous. Sylvia ma'am says students will be able to form their own sentences using tenses correctly.
Okay. So, yeah.
Students will
Hmm.
be, Rena ma'am says students will be able to enlist variety of metals.
Hmm. Hmm.
There are a lot others. If you want me, I can read out.
No, yeah. Thank you so
Otherwise,
much. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Those who have responded, those who are read and not read, everybody. I'm sending a big thanks. Okay. So, see, just one thing again I want to clarify here. So, what is my main purpose of conducting this is that when we write learning objective and outcome, there is a little bit of difference. So, as I said in the starting of the session, so when we are writing learning objective, that is the overarching goal that is supposed to be achieved, right? So, we make our full efforts to achieve that goal no matter what. We may have to change our teaching style, we may have to change our strategies, we may have to reiterate the things to students, we may have to conduct some interventions for the students, but that objective is supposed to be achieved. Because if objectives are not achieved, actually, then there is no point of conducting any course, any session, or i mean um, planning anything, right? So the goals are supposed to be achieved. So we will never write, when we are writing a learning objective, that should be one thing. Please keep in mind, everyone, that we should always try to write learning objective in one concrete statement, right? So when we write learning objective, it should be students will, means they are supposed to, that is determined. So students will, not will be able to. When we write learning outcomes, that is student specific. Like as I said, that I have written that student will be able to define photosynthesis. Now out of 10 students, maybe 5 are able to define it correctly, 5 are not able to define it correctly. So I may have to intervene to them again and again, I may have to prompt them again and again, or I may have to change some strategies for them. But they will be able to, after all my efforts, they will be able to. But my larger goal is they will conduct the experiment that is supposed to be done no matter what. So all other parts, that is to achieve the learning outcomes, is more or less teacher's responsibility. So for that, I design my activities in such a way, looking into all the different levels of the students in my class, that I am able to cater to every child in the class. So we all know that there is a percentage of kids which are brilliant, percentage of kids are average, and some are below average. So we cannot assume that if I have designed something like a learning outcome is designed for a brilliant student, so that will be achieved by an average child or below average child also. So I have to look down upon that. That's why I'm saying that learning outcomes are can never be one or two. They are supposed to be more than three and more than four particular session may, right? So we need to pay very minute attention to this, that when we write a learning objective, that is a determined goal to be achieved. It has to be achieved. But when we write learning outcomes, so learning outcomes may require you to change your teaching strategies, to do n number of other things to cater to everybody, so that they come to that level, so as each one of them in the class are able to achieve the goal that you have set for them for a particular session or a particular unit. I hope I have made myself clear. So next is what to avoid while framing learning objectives and outcomes. So here are some verbs, like the verbs that are unclear and verbs that relate to unobservable or unmeasurable behaviors should be avoided, like appreciate, understand, know, learn, become aware of, become familiar with. So again, I'm repeating the same thing again, that these verbs are not measurable in any sense. They will not help the teacher to evaluate the performance of a child. है ना? So whenever, if you come across, any one of you, if you come across the rubrics, sometimes in our education field there are rubrics also, which we have to on the basis of which we have to evaluate the children. So the rubrics will never create such kind of I mean, they will never contain such kind of unobservable and unmeasurable behavior verbs written in them, right? So hence we should also avoid it at the first step only, when we are starting to frame our objective and goals for the students. And the last but not the least thing is that critiquing is very important. Please don't wait for somebody else to come and point you out for not doing this or that. Self critique yourself. That is the best practice that all the educators can do, because again, a teacher is a learner throughout his or her life. So please plan, execute, and review your own sessions, your own plans as many times as you can. Keep updating yourself, keep checking for new informations, new techniques, new strategies. And that's all from my side. So Simran ma'am, I hope I am on time. And if anybody want to ask any question now, they are most welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I think we are on time, and I will take the next 10 minutes to see if there are any questions from the audience, and I'll read
Yes.
them out to you and you can answer them. I would
Yes.
request the audience to put in their questions in the chat box so that we can answer them now for your convenience. Yeah.
I think I can come down to my normal screen now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yes. I would request the audience to please put down their questions in the chat box. Rosemary ma'am wants to know, ma'am, if they can have a copy of your slides.
Definitely, please do send them.
I would request the participants to write to team@centa.org, and we will be sharing the slides with you. There is a question. Okay, there are questions coming in now, and I'll try to read them out for you. Dharyam wants to know, is it necessary to go from remember to higher levels if we want students to create?
See, I believe that when we start with any topic, so unless and until the child is understanding the concept, without understanding the concept, you cannot go to the level of creation. It's very important that we understand, we do research, we do analysis, collect information, and know each and every nick and corner of it, of any concept. Then only we can reach at the creation level.
Rena ma'am wants to know, does it mean that we should be brief in writing down learning objectives and outcomes?
No, I mean brief in the sense that you should exactly know what kind of outcome you want in your child, right? Like suppose when we are saying defining, so that means it specifies it to you that define means only define. So you should be able to get the definition from the child. If I'm saying explain, so you should be very clear, because learning outcomes, as I said, that learning objective and outcomes are for us, mainly for the educators, because we remain focused on, and we also get to know that what is our requirement as an educator from the child, right? What we want as an outcome in the child. So that is why it is written briefly and specifically. If we keep writing down elaborate statements, तो वो अगर आप उसको document भी करोगे, तो that becomes very, I mean, for the reader, for the people, those who will read your things, they will also get confused at what actually you want to prove or you want to say. So that's why it is required to be more specific and concrete in what you are writing.
There's a question, ma'am. What about the success criteria in a lesson plans? How do you, have success What is the success criteria of the lesson plan then in that case?
So yes, again, that is very subjective. So yeah, if there are 10 students in my class, and if like going by my same example, if all of them are able to conduct the experiment so well, so my learning objective is attained. So that is like I find my success in every session that I conduct. So that's what I'm saying, that I sometimes have to review my sessions. Maybe I didn't get the outcome that I wanted the children to achieve. So again, that is the success level depends upon how much attention you are paying to yourself or to your teaching strategies or the outcomes that children are achieving. So every session can become a successful session for you, but for that we need very much focused planning. So I believe that planning a session is very important before we step into the classroom. It's very important. It should be very clear at the part of an educator that what I'm going to conduct in this 50 minutes or 40 minutes. So that is very important.
Uh,
So if you are able to achieve that, so that is going to be a successful session for you.
Rashmi ma'am wants to know, the she wants a clarity about number of learning objectives and number of learning outcomes, if that's like something that we should keep in mind.
Yeah. So as I said, that learning objective should preferably be one statement. Like in one statement you should be able to express that what is going to be your goal, right? And learning outcomes can be n number of learning outcomes. It again depends upon what activities you are planning in your session for students. So per activity will have one learning outcome. Like if I'm teaching definitions, so define is my one learning outcome. If I'm explaining them something, so they will be able to explain me back, so that is another learning outcome. If I'm conducting a demonstration to show them something, how to conduct an experiment, so they will be able to conduct that and show me back, so that is another learning outcome. So learning outcomes can be multiple, but learning objective, I would say, should be one statement, one clear, concise goal that you want to achieve.
Pooja ma'am wants to know, are learning outcomes same as success criteria?
So, as again, I would want to repeat the same thing that yes, if we talk in terms of students learning, so if the child is able to do all those things, then of course that becomes a success criteria for the child, that yes, I was able to do this, I was able to define, I was able to explain. So there is a self reflection also. So what we can do is to help children know how much successful they were after attending your session and in understanding what you are teaching them. You can always give them a self reflection, wherein you can give them few questions to fill by the end of the session, that were you able to define this, were you able to explain this, were you able to conduct this, were you able to demonstrate this. So if they put a tick, a simple quick check you can give them. So that helps them to self assess themselves, that whether we were successful or not. Maybe some of them are able to checklist 4 out of 5, some are 3 out of 5. So this also gives a clear clear platform for you to see that how many of your students were at the level where you expected them to be.
Eric sir wants to know, is it necessary to communicate the learning outcome to the learner, or they must remain, in the session, like the lesson plan? Is it important for us to share the learning object outcome for the day with the child? Does that help the lesson?
Yes, ma'am. I believe it does help. It does help, but again, it depends. As I said, that it should be more clear to the educators. But if we are coming, there is no harm in communicating the learning outcomes to the students, as I do in my sessions, because I really want them to be very clear what I was actually means what I planned for them and what I wanted them to achieve. So I at my end want them to be very clear that what they were doing in the whole session, what I wanted them to achieve in different ways, right? So there is no harm in sharing the learning outcomes, because after all what we are teaching is for the students only. If the child is not getting what we are trying to tell them or what we are trying to teach them, then there is no point of teaching only. So there is no harm in sharing the learning outcomes with them. There should not be any secrecy in that, what I believe.
Okay, thank you ma'am. I think yeah. Okay, I think that's like covers most of the question. There's a question by Naval sir. He wants to know, how do we apply political science subjects and Bloom's taxonomy? How do we apply Bloom's taxonomy to
Political
social
science.
sciences? I think is what he or she
I
is
think I think
asking.
social sciences is a very dynamic subject, sir. So it's not only about sciences. Yes, I can understand that you must have felt that I am from a science background, so maybe I was giving a lot of examples from science. But what I feel is that social science is a very dynamic and very interesting subject as such. So when we talk of, like, suppose if what example I can take. Okay, so let's talk about our legislative assemblies and councils, maybe. So, when we say, remembering part. So, what is, what, which, where? So, these are the question stems that can lead to answering to the questions related to the remembering part of the Bloom's taxonomy. Then, understanding the process. Obviously we are going to explain the process, how these assemblies are being conducted, right? Then application. Now how the application part comes in, you can ask your students to just dramatize that thing, like one act plays can be done, or they can create a legislative assembly in the classroom and then they can put up few topics, right? And then again, so when it so slowly, then analyzing debates can be conducted in the classroom, right? Then when we talk of evaluation, so as an evaluator you are sitting as a judge, so then evaluations can be done, or maybe some of the students become the judge and then they evaluate the things, whatever topics are being discussed. Then when we come to creation, so creating is again, what are the solutions, all those problems that are being discussed. The world is full of problems, right? So what are the solutions that we are trying to propose, or what can be proposed? So that can come into the creation part. So I hope, not from a social science background, but I hope I have satisfied, sir.
Uh, I think that's like more or less the questions that we received today. I okay, so there is another. There's a question by Dhairyam. They want to know, while planning, how can teacher direct the way students' thinking and questions will go during the session? I think that's a little out of the context of this webinar, but if you can help us
No, no, no,
answer.
no, 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 it's perfectly fine. So, can you just please repeat the question?
While planning, how can teacher direct the way students think and question
Mhm.
during the class
Hmm.
when the session
No,
is
see,
going on?
again, when I was doing my bachelor's in education, so there was a professor who used to tell us that teacher is a very clever creature. So, like manipulations, right? So I have planned something, so it is not necessary that my session goes exactly the way I have planned. You have to change according to the current scenario. You may have to change. So depending upon, we can always change the way we are asking our questions. So like I have asked a higher order thinking question, but then there are, again, as I mentioned before, that there are different levels of students. If the child is able to understand very well, if the child is not able to understand, I will have to change the way I am asking my question. I may have to give him or her an example and then ask the question, right? So I may have to build an analogy and then ask the question. I may have to bring the question to a very low level of it and then ask the question. So depending upon, sir, that planning is for us, that what we are going to deliver, but how we are going to deliver will depend upon the current scenario, current environment. But again, when we are teaching a class regularly, we are very much known of our children. हमें पता होता है कि कौन सा बच्चा कौन से लेवल पे है, so we are able to modulate our sessions and our teaching strategies accordingly. The best way is, I missed it during the seminar, but the best way is when we take care of the four C's when we talk of 21st century learners, right? So collaboration and cooperation is the best way. So we can always group children in such a way when we are teaching them in a classroom, wherein we have all categories of students in a group, uh, so that the children are learning better through peer learning. Peer learning is also a very good way through which children learn. So these kind of setups can be made, then we can always change our way of asking questions, but we need to stick to that thing only. We should not try to divert from that thing, because otherwise the whole planning will fail. So that is again on the spot changes that we can make.
Thank you. There's a question by Pushpa ma'am. She wants to know, she's a facilitator for life skills in a
Hmm.
school, I believe. And
Hmm.
how does she use Bloom's taxonomy in that context?
Yes, so life skills, again, life skills are soft skills which deals with our daily, day-to-day activities, right, that we conduct. Now, again, coming back to when we talk of life skills, ma'am, so life skills is more of when we go out in community and deal with the real life issues. That is why these are called life skills, right? So the skills that we need to deal with our life on daily basis. So again, Bloom's taxonomy is like a child of 4 or 5 years, a 3 year or 4 year child or 5 year old child, he or she is not out of the family so far. अचानक से वो स्कूल चला जाता है, स्कूल जाके आपने देखा होगा कि जब छोटी क्लास में होते हैं बच्चे, तो उनको थैंक यू, सॉरी, एक्सक्यूज मी, ये वर्ड्स बहुत हाईलाइट किए जाते हैं, बहुत सिखाए जाते हैं. सो दैट इज द रिमेम्बरिंग पार्ट. Then, now when they are given a situation, so a child is in a classroom, there is an activity conducted and a child is giving something to somebody, maybe a birthday is there of a child and the child is distributing toffees, so the other child is expected to say something. So that is the application part, that what they learn, that if somebody is giving you something, you say thank you, so they are saying thank you now without the prompt of the teacher. So that comes into the application part. Then again, when we apply, analyze, so if like I am showing them a video of, suppose we talk of Rajasthan, suppose, so there is a lot of water scarcity and there are people, those who have to travel so many distance, I mean, long distances to fetch water and then get back. So again, now this video I'm showing to the students of suppose you take grade 6 or 7, right, 11 to 12 or 13-year-old kids. So I'm showing them this video Now they are sitting and discussing that discussion part. That again, the discussion part is the analysis part, that they have been given an information, they have been shown a video, now they are analyzing that information that is given to them, then they are evaluating, then they are creating. So they will put themselves in that situation, they will put themselves in the shoes of those people, and then they will think of that if they are in that situation, what will they do. So that comes in the creation part. So what I want to say is, so all these three domains of cognitive Bloom's taxonomy can be covered in any learning area. We just need to be a bit more focused and creative and think critically when we are planning our sessions.
Thank you, ma'am. I think with that, I we will close for today's session. I have put the link to the feedback form on the chat box, as well as the email that you can write to if you are looking for the PPT for this session. That's team@centa.org. Uh, Please reach out to us if you need the PPT of the session. I will request ma'am to share that with us so that we can share it with the participants.
Yes.
Thank you, Navpreet ma'am, for a very engaging session. It was, as a few comments that I saw, it was a very good refresher for all of us, because we've been writing learning objectives, but it's a good refresher to see it from a newer perspective. Thank you so much, participants, for engaging with us today. To register for more such upcoming webinars, you can please visit my center. Uh, and in the end, I would just like to thank ma'am and the audience. And with that, we will close the session. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, thank you so much, thank you everybody, thank you